some kind of notification right as I push the button. Sorry about that. If I looked kind of weird for a second, I don't know what that was, but at any rate, hello everybody. Welcome to lunchtime. Uh, this morning I heard uh, every now and then I read a book or something, and I read this book about Jimmy Carter when he was young, and I'm pretty sure that it was a robin that he shot. It was his very first thing he ever shot was a BB gun, and I brought it home, and his mom had the good wisdom. He described this story as she had the good wisdom of saying, "Let's cook it up and let's eat it." And she didn't look down on it or anything like that. And she saw it as an accomplishment of what he did, and that it was a great story. A very telling thing about being young and stuff like that. Uh, the boys, when it comes time to for someone to become a tracker, there's a few things that if you're going to be introducing them to it, there's a few things that I did that might be helpful to you. And I needed a reason to kind of do a whiteboard, and I wanted to do that again. And so I've definitely got one. And these might be a way of helping you get someone started and be interested in it. And you'll have to put up with my wiggly camera thing here, and I'll get you over to it. I didn't really want to do it on an actual whiteboard, so I fine-tuned it a little bit, and I did it on a piece of paper here, but I'll get you guys set up, and then we've got some stuff to talk about. See if I can get it. So it's pretty decent. It can be a little lower. Sorry. Myself, when I got started, and my uncle was the one who talked me into it. I said, "There's rabbit tracks going around everywhere in the woods. We got a four-wheeler path here with a couple of a fork in it, and bunches of forest types, a field and a pasture, some hardwoods, right? Typical stuff that you'll find most anywhere." Uh, One of the things he told me to do is he says, just follow tracks around. And of course, with a rabbit track, like you can see up here, the two back legs are in the front of the direction it's going. So I knew that, the rabbit was hopping and his back legs land. At first, his front legs land, and then his back legs cross over and land in the front of those. This hits first, but this hits second. And that's because he's hopping, right? So I would come across a set of tracks going someplace. And a lot of times the tracks you notice are ones that where it went way out around. And most of the time, if there was an object nearby, the rabbit would go be near an object, right? Because it's worried about things coming from above and grabbing onto it or something. So he told me, he says, just follow the tracks up to where there's a brush pile and give it a kick. And if there's a rabbit hiding in underneath it, look under it first. If there's tracks all around it, look under it and see if you can see the rabbit sitting there. And if it's over hiding under the brush and you can't see it, but you give that dead tree a kick and the rabbit hops out and runs away, just go ahead and shoot him right there. Stay someplace so that he can't get away. Keep your shooting lanes open and just go around kicking brush piles wherever they are, and you'll find a rabbit. If there's tracks around it and you come to a giant brush pile, there's a fair chance the rabbit is in it or he visits it and it's close to another one someplace where he's actually sitting. That was like brainstorming advice for me. Now, no one took me in the woods and showed me all these things. And of course, I learned through trial and error. I would find a track. Now, sometimes when you find a track, it's the beginning of where he hung out all night and hung out all day yesterday and then got up and fed all night. And there's millions of tracks. And then he loped out and like crossed the four-wheeler trail where you came along. And now you pick it up and now you spend all your time trying to figure out where he is as he went around and fed and did his thing and then finally hopped across the road and went running up and then found a brush pile for him to hang out in. When it comes to deer tracking, and rabbit tracking, we're only talking scale. A big critter, this could be, 2.5 miles or 6 miles across this area. where he's been. And these barnyards for a rabbit might only be 25 yards or 100-yard little circle of a barnyard where he's messed around here quite a bit and then took off, or he's in there. You come up to it and you go all the way around it and he didn't come out. Right. So you learn some of the techniques that you'll learn later on when you're actually tracking a big buck, and all the rabbit techniques that you would learn are going to end up being the same thing. So we would take that and walk into it. And of course, I was hunting with a friend. If you take a new hunter out and you're hunting with two people, and dad takes Junior out and the two of you follow along, and when you come to something, dad stays back and lets Junior walk in close and have a look. I would let the boys, Casey or Taylor or Ryan, walk out around it and just look at it and look to see if you can see the rabbit in there before you go kicking it. Because now you're shooting at a not moving target, which is a lot easier, and you're way closer and you'll have some success. Meanwhile, I would stand back and just watch. And if the rabbit escaped while the boys went around and they didn't see him jump out, I would know that and say, "Hey, he's over here, go ahead and shoot." Or no, like he came back towards me and ran back this way, and I didn't want the boys to shoot, he would go by and I'd let them come around and I'd say, "You just jumped him and he went this way." So I would stand back and let the kids do the circling. Let the puppy, right? The old dog just stands there and watches and lets the puppy do the circling. And then when it popped out, you would do something about it. Now, if you can see it bedded down and you can pick it out, well, that's always the best. And it's the same thing with deer hunting, right? That's the same exact thing that you would do. Now, what it does teach you is that, you learn when the rabbit's jumping and going places and it's hop, 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 and these are far apart. That was great because you could tell that the rabbit was like on the highway. He was jumping, like Joe Donito says, jumping along, really staying in a line and really going somewhere. When he pulled up to a bunch of brush and he started circling and going in and around it and stuff, well, it's time to be careful. Now, what it also teaches is that you need to look out for the cover up ahead. So if this was all hardwoods right here and we were going up through the hardwoods and a rabbit was just jumping and going across, I could tell the boys he's traveling. So go right ahead and just walk right on his tracks and follow him right along and look for the island, right? So it taught them to start looking ahead at the kind of cover that it could be. Watch the wind, whichever way the wind happened to be blowing. We could make our wind say blowing that way, and your wind could scare a rabbit if you're real close to him. So if you come to it and you circle around, you don't have to go walking right in it, especially say this is kind of sparse and you can see the track is back and forth, but it's not likely to be in there. You would swing out around. So if he was there and he took off running across the open, you would have a shooting lane. Well, that's the same type of thing that you would do with deer, only just on a bigger scale. So it teaches you the island effect, where you're looking ahead in the woods to see where likely things are going to be. It teaches you to scan the area and to stay in shooting lanes as you move along. And if the rabbit doesn't come out, it'll teach you to finish circling. And it also teaches take the downwind side. And this is very good, right? This is excellent education on a small scale. And the boys, when they learned all of these things, and I explained it to them as we went about doing it, and they started thinking bigger scale. When you got to deer, it was real easy for the island effect to matter when they were on the highway. It mattered when they were do-si-doing and going real slow. You learned like all of these transition spots. Plus, if there was a beautiful avenue where they're likely to bed, you'll get to the edge and you'll slow down. You'll start looking in and around and through. And of course, on a snowshoe hare that's all white, their eye is real black, and you end up seeing that dot. That eyeball stands right out on the rabbit. So, like, that was another thing that really was exceptional, because the boys would see the eyeball or see an ear, the black tip on the ear a little bit, or some of the edging. the fur, right? And so they would look right directly under the log. They would learn to look under branches that had like a snow roof over the rabbit as the rabbit hid underneath it. So they learn to look into the area and to hunt very slowly and be ready to go, but also to try and do their best to spot it. And it taught them to pick over spots and any places where they couldn't see as they went around and they couldn't see into it and they had some cover of some kind, they could use that cover to get closer and then lean out real slow and careful and look and then come around and look. And then they'd end up spotting it. And as me as an observer, right, they also had to pay attention to the direction that I am so that they're not shooting towards me. It gave them a chance to think about where the bullet's going to go and what's going to happen. Now, if I happen to be in a bad spot and they happen to see the rabbit right there and it's sitting there and they put the gun right on, they say, I got him, and I'm in a bad place, I would say, okay, I'm going to move and I'll get out of the way and get clear and then pow, and they would shoot it. Once you've kind of got the hang of it and you've learned to spot them in their little forms, and some rabbits would go to the same little form where he sits, that little spot, he would go back to that over and over all the time and spend quite a bit of time there. And once it was discovered, sometimes he would abandon it and go to another form in another place. But oftentimes he would have two or three forms and they would learn where those forms were and they could cut right through the woods and go right to his form and check and see if he was there. The other thing that was really awesome was that it taught them to check all the checkpoints, the choke points, right? Those funnels where everything would come through. If they knew the rabbit liked to be here, they could go up through here and check real quick. They could go over here and check real quick, and they'd say, "Yep, he's in there," or "No, he isn't." And if he'd been in here and traveled through and managed up to this spot, they could say, oh, that's probably him. Take that, go up here and get to him faster than starting at the beginning and spending the whole night messing around. It teaches you to like be frustrated with overwork, right? Because if you spend a lot of time following him around the entire day and everywhere he went, and yesterday's tracks, it teaches you the freshness of tracks as well, and which one's a new one and which one isn't. If all the tracks are going fairly slow and easy, and you go smashing through the woods and you can't find anything, and you get back out, and here goes a running track, you know that you probably jumped him and you can now take that running track and follow it. So it taught them to sift through the woods and to check for those choke points, the bottlenecks in all of their hunting. It also taught them how the brush and uh, the smaller low areas where it was tough walking and tough shooting, and how that was usually where most of the game was, or it was near the edge of it. And when it was disturbed, it would run out through the bigger trees and out and make a loop. And if it was running, and they learned to follow it and learn to, and as soon as they went through some big open area and then came to a tight patch, and they could see that coming up ahead, they could see those blowdowns, they would slow down, put something in between, and it taught them to walk with the cover as well. This was key. These are all key things that you want to do while you're deer tracking. And this is the chance to teach this on a really small scale. This might only be 100 yards across this whole thing. But that's all it would take to get you to start your training and to do it on a small scale. Now, if you jump the rabbit out of here and say this is a 100-yard circle and you jumped him twice and now he is running and staying way ahead of you and he's really going and he stops and watches and when you catch up he takes off and runs some more and he goes way up for a swing and goes for a quarter mile way out around and then stops way over here. And then in the evening, hippity hop his way right back to his little spot. He'll do that. So sometimes we would spook them out of the area. They'd go for a big swing somewhere. Say it was all posters up here and we couldn't hunt this chunk of woods. The next day, when we came to rabbit hunt, we would go right back up here where we left him and look for him on this edge of things. And when we found him going in, we'd say, oh, here he comes fresh. Now remember, that's an old track, right? So and when it got dark, he would get up and head for home, and be back across here sometime during the night. This kind of system of doing this, and also hunting together with someone else and being able to you can talk and make some noise around rabbits, which was really handy because we could whisper or even talk out loud, and we could also learn to hunt like a coyote. If I went in over here and Casey started in on the track and went into that block of woods, he could pull in nice and quiet and stop, and I could swing out around and do a drive right back towards him. Now, if this was a real spooky rabbit and the boys had already scattered him a bunch of times and we needed to change tactics because you couldn't just walk up to him because he would take off running, we would put on little drives and force him to go into places where there's kind of a dead end and he has nowhere else to go and he's likely to come down and come back again. If we put him up here and this is a huge chunk of woods and we could lose him up here, we'd push him back towards where we could work with him and hopefully get more than one opportunity at him. So it taught the boys how to really like adjust what they do and how they do it and adapt your hunting method to what you have going on. And this is really like a cool way of learning not only that rabbit and learning your woods, but also learning forest types, learning choke points. Also, too, looking way ahead and looking for movement and spotting something way out there. Later on, you'll get really good at it, and the poor rabbits are kind of like in trouble. And the boys would get to the point where it's just a rabbit, dad, and they're easy and they're just right over here. And like, so they could go out rabbit hunting and track down a rabbit and get it fairly easy now. And they didn't do, especially Taylor, didn't do a great lot of it when he was young. And uh, Ryan and Casey did it quite a bit, and then they kind of mastered it and they just wanted to move on, like let's go for deer, that's way better, right? And they could use their legs more, they could go farther. And rabbits are okay to eat, I mean they're all right, but they're nothing special. You'd probably starve to death on rabbits if you had it's all you had to eat, but better than nothing, right? They learned how to cook them and clean them and skin them and like all that kind of stuff, and like it was good for them, uh, and to take care of the meat. And then later on, when it was challenging, we would only like they would go out 22s, right? Or they would go with a shotgun and shoot at him when they're running and practice their shotgun skills, practice their 22 skills. Then later on, even went out with archery equipment. And Taylor's just barely a couple 3 years ago, just barely went out and shot his first rabbit with a bow. He'd never done that before, and I'm like, "Want to go track a rabbit? I mean, you got your archery equipment. We put on a judo point, and like, let's go out. Yeah, I've never done that before. Let's go do that." So the two of us went out, and we did that. Like, you learned how to hunt like coyotes, right? Parallel each other and keep looking, and it's a small scale swinging and following and looping out and keeping track of each other all the time. And nope, tracks definitely, you're on the track and I've got nothing over here, right? If you're on the track and your wingman is going out here, out around, and the track turns and he keeps coming, and then all of a sudden the rabbit, it might keep the rabbit from coming back to you, or the rabbit does leave the tracker, runs into the wingman, turns right around and goes right back to the tracker, and the tracker shoots it. That's happened quite a few times too. So it's a good way of like training. Not only like I would think this would work with a dog, a puppy especially. You could do almost the same thing with the puppy. Bring the puppy in there, let him learn it a little bit, let him discover, oh, here we go, and then get him on the scent, watch him and help him out a little bit. This method of working and double teaming is excellent. And it's also, rabbits aren't super crazy to just like take off and go. Some of them are real sitters and they'll just sit there and let you walk right up to them. I even took my dad out, and him and I tracked. He was quite a bit older. He was retirement age, and I talked him into tracking a rabbit. We have brand new snow. There was one right there, and I'm like, "Have you ever tracked a rabbit down before? Seen it sitting in the woods?" And he's like, "No, I never have." I said, "Well, come on. I'm pretty sure this one's right here, right?" So you learn to read the sign of where this rabbit likes to eat. You'll see the spots that he goes to have something to eat. You'll see the little spots where he hangs out. To have a look around, and he's like active, but he isn't going anywhere, like a little mope zone where he just goes and hangs out and he feels safe and he has some cover around him. How he uses the woods, you learn like small scale how a small animal would do it, and then you'll learn how to walk and be quiet out around things and to look in and underneath and then keep shooting lanes open or at least sight lanes so you can see him when he runs. All that stuff was excellent and it was really, really good. And it was a great way of like training someone. Now, even if they don't want to actually kill something, to just take like the granddaughters out and show them a rabbit in the woods and show them how to go about finding it. What a cool thing. And when you walk up to a rabbit and it's underneath the brush pile and it's just sitting there motionless and it's not moving, and you show it to the girls, and then they go ahead and scare it and they walk over there and it runs off, and they can learn about it. So it's such a great way of experiencing the woods, experiencing valuing wildlife and working with it. I don't want to miss any of the comments here, but I want to check out. I'm glad so many of you are here today, and that's really awesome. Peter shows rabbits. I don't know what that's about, but Um, yeah, sometimes I did a lot of drawing when I was young, and I'll just sketch something out real quick. It's a great way of like showing it. If I had some satellite kind of stuff, I would definitely use some of that to help explain things. But if you see it when you look down on it and you talk about it in that method, and then when you also I when I in a lot of my hunting, I keep like a god's eye view. I that's why satellite onyx or even maps, when you have satellite and you can look down on where you are and how you are on that map, that that beautiful photograph of the spot that you're in, and you can see the shape and the design of it, you'll know exactly where to walk and what to do. And then you learn how to best work your way through the landscape, and after a while you'll get so good at practicing that god's eye view of your hunting and where you are, and I kind of see it from up above and it would be shaped like this, and right here's where I want to sail my little boat through this wilderness because this is the best places to come on to things. You'll be able to pick out cover later on. And like right now, I can drive down the road at 50 miles an hour and just point out places for you to rabbit hunt, to deer hunt, to moose hunt. From the highway, I can be just zipping down and look at landscapes and say, right here, and right here. I could go to Yellowstone or any place like that where I've never been before. And like Taylor and I did this last spring, we went out to Yellowstone and we just used our normal like way of thinking about the landscape, looked at all the pockets of cover, we looked at the types of cover and the connections to all of those. And there's so much of it is wide open kind of prairie type stuff, and it looks like there's nothing there but just grassland or sagebrush, but that's not the case, right? There's a ditch, and the ditch gets used the most in that bunch of prairie, right? So you learn for the shape and the forms of things, and you're able to spot and do. And we ended up filming 16 bears while we were there. We're like, that's bear country, that's bison country, that's where the elk are, that's where the elk sheds are. It didn't take long, and we started developing these patterns, and in a very short while, really figured it out. When you're in popple brush, young popple trees near a few older popple trees in a draw along a brook or a little bit of a water type notch in the landscape, and there's big timber uphill, look out for grizzlies. That's where they are. You start picking up all that kind of stuff in a very short while, and of course you're not ignoring anything, you're using what you have and what you got going on. Then you blame Walter. Peter snowshoeing the rabbit. There's a lot of cool things that you can do when you do go out hunting that you can apply, and they'll help like crazy. It's very valuable too later on in life when you come into your driveway and there's snow everywhere. I can tell how many rigs have been up my driveway and driven out back behind the house. As soon as I get there, I can look at the mailbox and say, oh, there's mail, or oh, there isn't, by the tracks, right? So you can use that information now to help you investigate what's going on. And that as well was very good for the boys when they would go out and follow the rabbit for a little ways and they would see what he was feeding on, the balsam fir, the needles, or if he was chewing on some ferns, or he had some raspberry brush that he'd been nipping on or whatever. You could see all of those things, and then we would know. Now there's also an investigation after you get the rabbit. So we would get the rabbit and we'd take him apart, you know, skin him out, usually right in the middle of the back. Pull the snowsuit off in both directions, right? And then cool the meat off as quickly as possible. We cut through, we see where he'd been, what he'd been doing. We wanted to know if it was a buck or a doe. That was always interesting. We'd always try and see if we could figure out or guess what it was, and then see how right we were about it. The other thing that was even more like helpful for it in the beginning to learning with deer as well is like where the up ahead the deer is likely to do things. It gets you to be the rabbit was likely to be he's probably up by that big blowdown that I can see 60 yards in front of me. He's either right there or he's somewhere in all these little firs with the snow bent down and he's underneath one of those. So we would pull up. We saw a clear lane between those two likely spots. We'd pull right up so we could see and see if there was any tracks crossing between those two. No tracks, and my track goes to the right. Now you know it's the right hand object, the right hand possibility of where he would be. It's on that side. So let's stay on the downwind and let's hook up there real slow and easy and hunt slow and easy and look for that thing and be ready to go, right? So it taught you your gun handling skills, being ready, shooting lanes, being quiet, and eyeballs for picking out what you're looking for in this like mosaic that it blends right in with. Once the rabbit got up and started to run, and you had moved him more than one time, and now he is really, really running, and you spend the entire day like chasing him around and looking for him way up ahead. And so after a while, they're 75, 100 yards away. They see you and they take off. It doesn't take long when you really start chasing them hard that they start making like circles over the top of where they've already been. And so you learn to, especially in the bottlenecks, you learn to stomp on all the tracks. So if he makes a circle and comes back through there and he walks on top of your tracks where you and his tracks where he was before because he made a circle, rabbits love to circle, not only in their regular business, but when they're being chased, right? So you learn which is a new track and which is the old track, and you learn where he's likely to stop and where he's likely to just keep right on charging. You learn how to cut across the circle, but you lose the information and you might get on the wrong track. You learn to stay on your track and you learn the differences between the tracks as well in a very short while. And once he makes a loop and then remakes another loop and then makes another loop in the opposite direction and crosses over the eight, right? Like all of that, especially when you keep in the back of your mind the God's eye view look at it, is very important, and it'll teach you stuff so quick and easy, and it is so much fun to learn all that and now apply it with what you got going on in the ground. And sometimes when you finally did get that rabbit who's been getting away for a month or two and you haven't been able to get him, and now he's a really wise rabbit between all the natural predators that are trying to kill it and what you have there, it's a really smart rabbit. And you feel really glad when you pick that bugger off, especially once he's well trained. And so he really becomes a bit of a trophy because you're so happy about finally getting him. And it's a great way of learning about yourself and improving what you can do. Not only your shooting skills, because now he's running and it isn't easy to get that bugger. Um, your tracking skills, your observation skills, your seeing and listening, and sometimes your focus. You learn your focus. And when you can let your focus down, it's okay. He's going across these hardwoods and he's running full blast. I don't really have to look for him. But if I do, where would he stop? Probably that hump over there where he could see, right? He'll stop someplace where he can watch. Rabbits are really big on movement. If there's a lot of quick movement, they're out of there. So if you're going real slow and easy, you can get away with a lot of stuff. So it teaches you when you can, the speed with which you can track as well. And it's more forgiving. You can make a mistake and then adjust and make up for it in that hunt, right? So sometimes when we it would go there, I would just follow them and let them do their thing, and I would let them make mistakes. That's the other thing is like when you're taking somebody out tracking, let them make mistakes. Let them, they need to have their problems, right? Because there's gifts in the problems of some of the things that go wrong. So keep that in mind as well. Those are all really there. It's such good training, and it just applies per scale. As you get something like deer or moose, something big, you're going to go a lot farther. They're going to walk a long ways, right? But it still applies, and some of those same things still apply. And some of the different little tricks of walking out, coming around and back on their own, and then jumping off to the side and taking off, that's not unusual for rabbits. Go, go, go. I don't like this spot. Turn around and come back. And I don't like this. And then finally, they see you coming right at them and they jump off to the side and go. And you come right up through and hit a dead end. It also teaches you when you can actually walk on the track and mess it up, and when you don't want to walk on the track and mess it up. Uh, Whenever there's trails and they get on a trail, and now you learn that trail and where it goes, and you'll now learn where to come in and walk on top of it and scratch it out. So if something comes through, you'll know, but also where to leave it and stay out here so you can see better. So like when to leave the track and when to come back onto the track, it teaches you that as well. And that's super valuable information. But is that thing behind you real? What are we talking about? The deer heads? Yes. They're real deer that I mounted. Yep. They're on styrofoam mannequins. Yep. Yeah. I'm a taxidermist. Yep. The the parts of the struggle and the ease of which it can be. One day you can go out and the thing will just sit there, especially like with a brand new snow and there's no rabbit tracks anywhere, and you walk right up to that blowdown. Odds are good the rabbits don't feel like moving anyway, and they're just kind of sleeping in those little forms and hanging out and not doing much, and they'll stick really tight. And then there are other days when it's beautiful and sticky and the running is good. Say there's a little tiny crust with a little bit of fluff on it, they'll just go because it's such good running. So they'll go like crazy. When it's big and deep and fluffy, they'll stick to where other rabbits have been, where they've been. They'll stick to trails a lot more. The other thing is like where you were hunting the day before will now become a trail where you walked because it's packed down and the walking is easier. The other thing is like as you go into a spot and you start hunting a rabbit and nothing's really bothering that one rabbit, you have an island and you go in there and you hunt that one rabbit a little bit and you come out. And the next day, the coyote comes down the road and sees your tracks going in and he has a trail and he goes right in there and he chases after the rabbit that you were after. And now that rabbit isn't even in there anymore and he's down in another block of woods, and you drive in on the four-wheeler and you look down on your tracks from yesterday and a coyote is going right out your tracks and going into that block of woods, I will turn around and head back down and go into a different spot, right? It teaches you the awareness of what has changed from yesterday to today as well. Yep. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, everybody, and I'll let you go and have lunch. I'm a little hungry myself. I was up a little early this morning, and it's time to have something to eat. But appreciate you all hanging out, and I'll probably do a live this weekend as well. I was thinking Sunday probably, but anyway, take care. See you later, guys. So long.